right, good evening and welcome to the Scarborough School Board of Education's workshop. The date is Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. May I have the attendance, please?
Sure. Mrs. Giftis. Ms. Casalonis.
Here.
Mr. Kelleher.
Here.
Ms. Leong.
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom.
Here.
Mr. Peony Huff. Mrs. Turner.
Here.
Ms. Giftis. And Ms. Bertulia.
Here.
Perfect. May everybody join me, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, agenda item is 4.0. Agenda item 4.0 is the workshop. 4.1 is the superintendent's evaluation process and goals. So really quickly, just so we're all on brought up to speed on what this process looks like and the different components, I just want to go through this piece fairly quickly. It's our policies. We have two policies that speak to our evaluation process, the CBI policy and then the CBIP. So those are the policies that guide our work in regard to the superintendent evaluation process. So our duties essentially are to set out the timeline, which we're going to talk through in just a minute. Each of us as board members would individually write a narrative for Jeff's evaluation, provide it to me, and then I would compose one whole document that is Jeff's evaluation. From there, what would happen is we would meet an executive summary as a board to just discuss the final document and numbers. And then we would meet again in executive session with Jeff to discuss the evaluation. At the same time, we're doing the individual evaluations. Jeff also does a self-evaluation that he provides to me, and that would be a part of the document as well. All right, so those are the components of the process. There are two time-sensitive pieces. So the annual review is due in no later than June. Also, the superintendent goal setting is to be done no later than the end of June. So those are our time-sensitive processes. And as you know, Jeff joined us in July, so he was not here to do goal setting in June. And the parameters when he was hired, the idea behind his, or the expectations behind his hiring is that he'd spend those first 6 months really getting to know the district, the staff, the faculty, the buildings, the facilities, the board, of course, and then his leadership team, which he's not been doing that, working on that. So the goals we set, or the goals that we discussed tonight, will be February to June. And then in June, we'll do this again to get us back on track. Make sense so far? Good. All right, so can you go to the next slide for me, please? Absolutely. So in the way of a timeline, I put down two options here. One is a little bit more, this first one's a little bit more of a condensed option. Where we would, the big difference between the two that you'll see is that this one, we have a special meeting in June. So I say that because that would give us 3 meetings in the month of June. And I know that with graduation, with the end of school year going on, this might not be one that everybody's able to do, but I did want to provide 2. So in this case, in this scenario, the 20th would be when the individual board members' evaluations are due to me, and Jeff's would be due. June 2nd, we would have an executive session at our board meeting, which is just us. That would be the first one I mentioned, where we would discuss the evaluation among the board. June 9th, we would have a special meeting, which was the executive session to meet with Jeff. So it would be solely for that purpose only, where we would discuss the evaluation with Jeff. And then June 16th, which is our normal workshop time, that's when we would meet with Jeff to set his goals. So this is option one. Option 2, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. Like I said, a little bit more, we have a little bit more time, so we're not as condensed there in June. So in this one, evaluations would be due to me the 12th, excuse me. We would meet in executive session at our May 19th board meeting, and that would be just us again. And then at our June 2nd meeting, we'll have our executive session with Jeff, and then June 16th workshop would still be setting goals. So this gets rid of that mid-June extra meeting. So wanted to open up for thoughts on this first, which are the options. Yeah, tell me what you think.
I'm fine with option 2. I'd prefer not to add a third meeting in June. I just think that's going to be tough on everyone at that time of year. And it's only what, a week difference to get things back into
Yeah.
in the second one.
It would just be a week difference. Thanks, Kristen. So we all, go ahead.
Yeah, I think option 2 works better, in my opinion.
Option 2.
Just seems less daunting.
Yeah, it's not so squeezed together. Perfect. How does, Leanna, are you good with option 2 as well?
I sure am.
Perfect. All right, well then let's stick with that. So I'll send out a reminder as we get closer to it that when evaluations are due, but just know that, have in your mind that mid-May, May 15th, if you could get those to me, and then we'll be in and check for the process. All right. Fantastic. All right, so we have 2 more things I wanted to cover. I know I'm kind of moving quick. I just want to be sure we have enough time for the 2 discussions. The first is the evaluation form that I sent. And you have a copy in front of you, but you also have it via email. So to give you some idea as to where this came from, the 8 umbrella topics that you see in the evaluation are actually what was, or the performance indicators are what was in our job description from when we hired Jeff. So these are the 8 things we were looking for. And then underneath those performance indicators that fall under the umbrella, some of it is directly from the job description, some of it is, adjusted to fit more of what I think we would be looking for. So I want to open discussion on this too. Any thoughts on the evaluation or any questions or concerns? Sure.
So how does the information come to us? We take Jeff's word for it? I've done well, so.
Yeah, and some of it's
No,
gonna
seriously
be,
though.
I can tell you my process, my personal process. What I do is, if this is the form we would all agree to, I would save a copy of this onto my computer. And as I see examples of these throughout the year, I would be notating them so that when you get to May, you're not having to think, what did he do in January? What did he do in February? You kind of have these examples laid out for you. So it helps you to write the narrative. So yeah, you would be observing his behaviors and things that he's done. And for example, if you noted that he sent out a really good email to the community, perhaps you would note that in here so that it would be something that to speak to in the evaluation. But yeah, it's going to be you and your observations. Good question.
Leanne has her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Leanne, sorry.
No problem. I'd like to see us include something that has to do with the goals, since that is really what we should be scoring Jeff on. yes, the job description is really important, and that's probably what he'd be getting feedback from if he does a 360 or not with his own staff. But I'd love to see us have some sort of metrics in here about whether or not the goals that we put forward are being met.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I envisioned for after, because I made this prior to today, I envisioned another square at the bottom, which would be our other goals that we would then, lay out after that, after the 8. So yes, I think you're absolutely right that we have the goals too. Uh-oh. Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
That works.
Do we think, so in light of that, knowing that we could potentially have more goals down here, do we think that this is too many? Do we think this is good? How are we feeling about the length?
I think it's manageable. I
You
mean,
think
I'm
it's
assuming
manageable?
we're not gonna have like a massively long list of goals, so. if
Right.
It's just a few, then I think we're good.
Does everybody else feel like it's manageable?
I think it's manageable, but there's like number 4. I think I would strike that because that is one that is going to be really hard for us to know.
Okay, so strike 4.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
What are our thoughts on that? Striking number 4, which is the personnel management, staff development.
I think it goes back to my question of how do we
How would you
know
know
this?
that?
I mean, so if we can't, without being there, know it. It's very difficult to speak to it.
Mhm.
Is there not like some mechanism that there is input from other people besides the board?
Into his evaluation.
I don't know if that's typical or not typical.
I don't think it's, so you could, or Jeff could choose to do what's called a 360 evaluation, which would be his, those that work for him, evaluate him, we evaluate him as the board. So it kind of comes from all angles and then he does the self. So that could be a component of it, yet that's not something that we typically as the board would ask for. So typically it is just the board members that provide the input. If Jeff chose to do the 360, that would be more information for him to use versus us gathering.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder because it feels like an important component of the job to just disregard it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing, I guess circling back to John's, that can, a piece of it too, like I said, is Jeff's self-evaluation. So some of this could be things that he gives us in his self-evaluation. And then again, things that we note with the understanding that that would be, a little bit more difficult to. Mhm. How do you feel about number 4? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's a huge part of my job.
Mm-hmm.
My previous experiences have provided basically the entire staff an evaluation that's similar to this. And they had an opportunity to, and in some areas, a staff member may, have some input or, a way to read these different performance areas in their superintendent, and then others did not observe, as John was noting, as a board member, but have the opportunity to provide feedback to me and ultimately to the board as part of the evaluation. And then the other is a little more intense sit down with members of leadership council and central office leadership team, and having that be a component to information that you're receiving as a board about my performance.
Yeah, so that could be. That could be. Yeah. So did you hear that, Lan, sitting down with the leaders or hearing from leadership council on Jeff's performance?
And then, yeah, and then
Excuse me.
also, I mean, the same form that a board would use, that the board would use to evaluate against the standards. You know, a similar survey was sent out to every staff member in the district.
Is your hand raised? I can't.
It's not. I think that sounds great, Jeff. And I think what you're hearing is a hesitancy because this is something that historically we were not granted that opportunity to have those very open conversations with staff. If you're saying yes, I'd welcome it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't done as like a open forum or anything like that. It was through a survey
Mm-hmm.
that would then be returned to not, either anonymously or not, the staff members would fill it out, and then it would all be collected and collated with the board chair and then shared with the board ultimately.
Yeah, I
As
personally
part of the
like it.
process.
Yeah, and I personally like it too, that idea that, we observe what we observe, but then yes, to John's point on that number 4, it's difficult because we're not the day in, day out boots on the ground, but then that gives us that perspective too from those that he is leading. All right, so we're thinking staff survey with the same questions that we would get the results of. All right, so in that case, we would leave number 4. Do we feel good with that? Are there any other questions about the metrics or thoughts or concerns?
The only other question I have, Shannon, is when this comes out, will there be some sort of a rubric explanation as to what do you mean with the 1, 2, 3, and 4? Yes, it says beginning developing, but maybe some more context if somebody hasn't done one of these sorts of reviews before.
Yeah, absolutely. I can send, almost make like an instruction sheet to go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So we otherwise feel good about it? Yeah. All right. All right, well then I guess we move on to our goal setting piece. So the goals that we had set in our previous meetings, workshops and meetings that we've held and that we will vote on tonight. There were components of that included the superintendent, things that we wanted the superintendent to do. So if you need a refresher, those are in the slide deck for later on. You can take a look, but there are some pieces where we had items that we wanted the superintendent to cover. Specifically, we were talking about the metric setting. The DEI work, the goal with the, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I just want to make sure I read it correctly. Continuing to strengthen student success, achievement, and well-being through ongoing development in all subject areas, district-wide student support opportunities, social emotional learning, and through district-wide DEI work. So we had specific things in there that were goals for Jeff, such as the superintendent will report quarterly progress on all aspects of academics, including those with benchmarks. We said we would set superintendent goals to focus on growth in this area. And then we as a board said we'll monitor it on a quarterly progress. So, and then the first sub goal was establish a baseline in order to determine benchmarks for achievement in math and reading. So we have some goals already set. We have these performance indicators in the evaluation. So the last piece of this is working with Jeff to see what other goals we need to have for him and to flesh out what we've got so far. So that's where we'll spend the rest of our time. So I will open the floor for comments or discussion about goals. The other document, really quick, I'll interrupt myself. The other document is Jeff did provide us his goals at our last meeting. So there is that document as well. If you're looking at the slide deck, the 3 goals are 18, 19, and 20 that we've set. You want me to pull them up from the? Sure, yeah. Sorry, it's okay. Okay, so there's number 1, that we were going to promote and grow a district-wide culture of trust, inclusion, and collaboration with our item numbers under there. So maybe we'll do it this way. So this is our number 1 goal that we have as a board. Is there anything that we want to specifically have Jeff do in relation to this goal? Outside of what you see here and outside of the performance indicators that are in the evaluation form?
I don't remember what we said that meant, honestly. What does that mean?
I'm sorry, what is?
School governance structure? Is it for the first-
Alicia, can you turn on your microphone?
What does the annual review of school governance structure mean? I don't remember.
Let me go back.
Leanne, do you know?
I don't remember what that is. Unless that is the handbooks and the reporting structures.
Well, I'm not sure we should have it if we don't know what it is.
Well,
I think
just-
Leanne's right. I think it was about the reporting structures.
I'm just trying to think back if we even talked about it in our meetings and our workshops, and I don't even think we ever discussed it.
No, I think. Ugh.
I think
We
we did
might
in the
wanna
first
have-
one.
We did.
I think so.
I mean, are we trying to say like related to the decision making? Is that what it is? You do?
I'm not positive, but
That's your recollection.
that seems, yeah, that's sort of how I recall it.
not going to lie, I'm tempted to say we remove it before we vote on these if we can't
Yep.
even determine. Okay. Let me.
But while she's doing that, Leanne, when you were talking about the school handbooks,
Mhm.
that is something that we've sort of had on the back burner as like a huge undertaking that needs to be done at some point. And then I think that with COVID, it took a back burner, but in policy, we had some discussions about sort of what's the right mechanism, and we felt like policy was, but we hadn't had sort of dropped it off based on the whole COVID diversion. But you know, that could in theory be one of something to talk about for the goals is consistency with discipline and expectations has been sort of something that we've identified as a need throughout the levels and throughout the different schools, because we've heard feedback that it's handled differently and it probably needs sort of a wide lens approach to it.
I agree with you completely, Alicia. I'd also love to see us look at this from a perspective of ensuring that the handbooks are helping students if they need to report a situation, whether it's any sort of a situation, that they know who to report to and how and what their avenue is to get resolution.
That's actually a really great point, because, you know, that does tie into a lot of our other goals of terms of, you know, reporting of bullying or harassment or complaints in general. How do we make sure that we identify and publish that clearly so that people know where to turn for answers and sort of have that triggered for them. And so that could be a way to loop that sort of some of those to-dos in that sort of project.
Yeah, and I think, well, no, I don't think, I know that was something we discussed as one of the recommendations from the DEI committee to ensure that students knew where to report to. It was one
Part of
of,
the action plan.
it was
It
one
is
of,
in the action plan.
yeah, one of the things we brought forward. And I believe we did discuss too, including it in the handbook, yes? Am I that information as well? Diane, do you recall that?
In the DEI action plan, one of the actions is for schools to establish mechanisms and communication with students and staff about policies and procedures around that. And I believe that is well underway. Jeff, I know you're on the DEI on the PLC. You guys have been working on that.
Yep. Yeah, and there was a lot that went into making sure there's communication around how these things get handled and awareness around the handbooks and conducts this fall. So
Yeah, so if it's ongoing, I think it's certainly something we could put down as a goal, an additional goal. How do you see wording it? Wording the goal.
Leanne, do you want to take a stab at it?
Oh, you're so mean.
I know you're good at it.
Okay. Hold on, I'm thinking. I'm on the hot seat. Annual
Sorry.
review of school handbooks and reporting governance structures.
Did you say in review or annual review?
Annual review.
Annual review of school handbooks and governance structure?
Governance and reporting structure.
Annual Review of school handbooks and governance reporting structure. So it would be, I just want to be sure I'm clear on what we're saying here. So this would be one of Jeff's goals. It would not be something we put in our goal here, rather it's something that we give to Jeff as a goal. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it would be both.
I think we put it as personally, and I don't know if you're talking, Lachette, I think your microphone's off.
Sorry, I keep turning it off.
It's okay. So if I interrupted, I'm wicked sorry. I think the goal would be ours, and then Jeff's piece of the goal would be ensuring that this occurs.
So do we want to add some detail for like why we want to review it for
For Jeff?
sort of, yeah, for inclusion of the harassment, bullying, DEI reporting, to ensure that that's included in there as for resources for students at different grade levels. And then also to try to, and this is probably a huge project, so I don't know for realistically for timeframes, like what that entails. I know that the handbooks are published at a certain time during the year. So I think that, we need to have a conversation about that, like what the expectation is, because it may be, it's longer term work than 1 year can take advantage of. But there's the disciplinary process, there's the homework process, right? And those are all things we've discussed in policy that we need to get to once things stabilize. And we're not fully stabilized yet, I don't think, but I do think it makes sense to identify it as something that we should be working on, because it is something that we've been talking about for a few years now.
So I'm trying to envision in my head how we. Let me make sure I'm thinking as I'm speaking, so I'm going to take just a second. I almost wonder if we just take our goals that we've set now, the 3 goals, and we just transform those 3 goals, and that's what we evaluate Jeff on, because each goal has little pieces anyway of things he's going to be doing. And then we're not trying to recreate the wheel here, right? Like we've got an outline of what's important to us already. And if Jeff knows these are our goals that we vote on and we are looking forward to, then he's already got a metric in place, right, of things to work on. Does that make sense to you?
What makes sense to me is that my goals are aligned with the board's goals, but the two are separate. I mean, you're distinguishing, these are the board, we're setting goals as a board, this is what we want to achieve. And then my goals, which are synonymous with the district's goals, are the things that I'm focusing in on. But if it's, well, it's part of this, or we're evaluating this, I mean, the 2 things need to, I would think as a board member, I would want those 2 things very distinct in my mind. These are our board goals. And then these are goals that are specific to leadership council, central office leadership team, Jeff's work with personnel. And so I would keep the 2 separate in my own head, or would want to. just for clarity's purposes. Particularly if it's an integral part of my evaluation.
Mhm. All right, so then let's go back to what we were saying. So our goal is to have this annual review of the school handbooks and governance reporting structure. So really, that's our goal as a board, but it's also something we want Jeff doing. Is that what?
So maybe we can flesh that first goal out to include for, to strive for consistency, disciplinary consistency between the schools and grade levels, so each phase, so like if we're at the primary stage, we know that the structure is, there's a similar sort of mantra or thought process because we've talked about that, like consistency. So for disciplinary and for learning expectations too, like homework, whatever, like we've identified that in the past as like, we need to get consistency throughout all of those levels.
I guess when we're thinking about it, right, as our goals versus Jeff's goals, ours would be from a policy perspective. So to review our policies to get there, Jeff's would be more focused around the handbook and the actual like execution of this, right? I mean, so we're not going to focus on the handbook.
Right,
That
Jeff
would
would
be
be focusing on the handbook. Yeah.
Well, so we could do that, make it for the policy piece and for the review piece, that would be our, something that we would be expected to do just annually. And then, however far he can get, I mean, that's a huge undertaking.
Well, there's a difference between also policy and then how that policy is implemented. And I will just say, anecdotally, I have never seen bullying and harassment policies better and more thoroughly implemented than in Scarborough. And that's at all levels. And I see them all because they all come to me eventually and I have to review them. So never seen it done better.
That's great.
So I guess and just to be clear, I don't mean the disciplinary portion being limited to bullying and harassment, but the bullying and
Absolutely not. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
and that's just anecdotal information. I've been
Okay.
here 6 months, but with those two, the big issues and some of those things that can escalate and become much larger than even a
Okay.
district or could get to the board level, never seen it done more thoroughly, never seen it done better by any administrator.
Good.
So it's very, very strong.
Great
That's
to
good to
hear.
hear. Yeah.
But we did identify that I think in our discussions that, if somebody's subject to bullying or harassment, that they rely on somebody else to alert them to it, right? And so I think that what we talked about was it's important to us to have a direct line of communication to those individuals who may have been subject to that type of conduct, to know independently of anybody exercising their own independent judgment of whether this constitutes bullying, this constitutes harassment. So if it's in, the more places we can get it to the user, right, to the user level without interpretation, so the user could say, well, my principal doesn't think that this was bullying or harassment, but I do, and it's in my handbook and I can report it. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily something that's happening in Scarborough, but I'm saying that's something that we've identified in our conversations as we want to make sure that we promote that as strongly as we can.
Yeah, so I think I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think I'm hearing what Jeff's saying. So you're Alicia, if I'm hearing you right, your thought is that we need to be sure that the information is in the student's hands. They know where to report to, they know who to go to, should any event happen. So it's more of an informational piece so that if and when it does happen, a student knows exactly the steps they're to take.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, just the more, the myriad of ways we can get that information out to the student or to their parent, then I think, then we're really following the expectations of what those laws and policies are designed to do.
Okay, so for Jeff's goals, it's along, if I'm hearing correctly, I just want to be sure. We're talking that we're ensuring the handbooks accurately reflect reporting processes for students. Or not even accurately, just reflect, just have the reporting process that students can take.
So I think that there are a couple of things that we've, I mean, this is based on sort of past discussions with the board and not necessarily, don't necessarily constitute the conversations that have occurred with the members of the current board. But the conversations that we've had in the past are that there are, first of all, that yes, that piece is something that we should do. And it seems to make sense that it would go in the handbook. Separately from that, cell phone use, for example, in schools is like the response can vary by school, by grade level. Summer homework can vary based on in a school, for example. And there are different, so there are, I think that there are things that the handbook addresses that we were talking about. It would make sense to try to get district consistency within a school and within a phase level. And so I think that there's kind of two separate things. And so I think that our goal, as Kristen said, would be to ensure that the policies are updated and then review it annually, right? And then Jeff's goals would be to implement like a review of the student handbooks for disciplinary consistency and learning expectations. I don't know if it's consistency as well among schools in phase levels, and then the informational piece that we discussed.
Are you gonna say something?
No, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering if that's, as far as Jeff's goals go, if that's too specific in his, because he might have other ideas and other avenues that he sees as a more effective way to get this accomplished than just a handbook, you know?
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, is the handbook really where the disciplinary actions are laid out, right? Like that's where I'm kind of getting stuck to.
For the disciplinary piece, I think during policy, we had identified that it was. I could be wrong. And I would defer to Jeff and Diane for that.
Okay.
You know, when I shared goals with the board, I was trying to stay focused on this year. And part of that is coming in as new to Scarborough, where as we've already articulated, it's a lot of assessing, it's a lot of relationship building, it's a lot of getting to know the community and getting in schools and classrooms, building team, listening, learning, asking a whole lot of questions. We're also navigating a return to fully in-person instruction through a pandemic. So that was tried to encapsulate the first goal, focusing on a lot of those challenges that every single district is going through right now. And then also part of that first year, and I was casting it in the second part of the year, is really about starting to develop a shared vision and an assessment of, okay, here's where we are as a district. Here's where we can go, and here's where we can start doing that, and doing that in a very inclusive manner, getting input from staff, from students, from families, community members, town leadership, all of the above as part of a community-wide dialogue that would be scheduled sometime this spring. That's really what that second goal is about, is trying to really revise and relook at, Scarborough's strategic plan and have that be a goal to start that review process. And that's part of goal number 3, because there's a lot of things that are already happening across the district and with our leadership team, as well as with faculty, as far as the DEI work and building more inclusive connections for all families in Scarborough. Again, looking at and assessing, and I've been spending a lot of time with Monique and others and digging into the data that we do have. iReady data, NWEA data, which is now the common replacement for the MEAs. And the added benefit of using that test is that a lot of districts have been using it for many years, but also it has a fall and a spring component to it. So you're able to evaluate yearly progress that kids make from the fall administration to the spring administration and be able to create some of those academic benchmarks that will help with that future visioning and goal building. So that was really the third part of that goal, is looking at how do you build a strong academic foundation, and then how do we also continue the work with SEL. I mean, tonight I'm going to be, the board is going to be voting on a new position, our K-12 SEL position. So, all of those things are happening and have been happening over the course of the last year. So I tried to make that goal specific to those 3 areas: SEL, DEI, and then our student supports, which, we're looking at, okay, how did students fare over the course of the last year when they weren't in a classroom full time? And then how do we benchmark how Scarborough did versus the national average, or how Scarborough did versus, Maine students in general? And we have a lot of that data, and we'll be part of that process of identifying where we are academically and where we can go. So that's why I structured those 3 goals along those areas, as opposed to, and those 3 goals really being, and those aren't my personal goals. That's really kind of from everything that I've been assessing as I started in July. This is where the work is, and this is where I can help move it. So that was my thoughts behind the goals that I shared with the board.
Yeah, and my thoughts are very similar to yours, Jeff, because remember, we're setting goals for February through June, right? So short window, because we're going to do this again in June. So I don't want to put down an unrealistic number of goals for just this very short period. But in my mind, one of the things I was thinking is that community dialogue, spring dialogue, that's a goal. To me, that's a goal for Jeff to do.
Well,
And one we could put down,
I mean,
right?
then why are we having the workshop if he's already set his goals and we're not entertaining other options?
Well, we are entertaining other options. I'm telling you, my thought process was very similar to Jeff's. We only have, I don't want to overload a lot of goals in a February to June window when we're going to do this again in June. That's my concern.
Okay.
But in my head, one of the goals I had, it was the spring dialogue. I thought that was a good goal to set. Me personally, I thought, for him.
Can I make a really unpopular suggestion then? If our goals are this comprehensive and we're going to do them again in June, would we be better served to use these for our June goals moving forward and take a subset of these from now until June that Jeff can work on? Just so that we remain in alignment. And if what we're saying is that this is too much for the superintendent to complete, is it also too much for the board to complete in that same time frame?
So I'm sorry, tell me again what your thought is to do what with the goals from the beginning, at the beginning.
What we would need to do is to have 1 or 2 action items under each goal from now until June, and then bring back the remainder in June to be completed in the full year.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So choose the 1 or 2 from each that are most important to us from now till June.
Yep, and then that would be able to be feeding into Jeff's goals.
Uh-oh.
We just lost Julianne.
I think she's there. All right.
I mean, I guess I'll just say that I think in concept, I just have an issue with the board not setting the superintendent goals.
No, I think we should set the goals. I'm certainly not suggesting we don't set the goals. I do think Jeff has a part in that, right? Like it's an interactive, like what we're doing here. What I'm saying is I just want to be sure, like maybe the goals between now and June that we pick are a little bit fewer because in June, we're going to set goals for an entire year in June. Right now, we're only setting goals for a few months.
Right.
That
no,
was my point.
I understand that, but I guess none of the goals that he's picked, he's going to accomplish in June, right? So do we just say, okay, well, we don't have any other aspirations other than the 3 that he's chosen for himself. And so we'll just, because we're going to come back in June. I mean, that's what we've been doing for years at
Oh,
this
no,
point
no,
because of the sort of tumultuous road we're on. And I honestly think that we're not doing anybody any favors by continuing to kick the can down the road.
No, I think we do set goals. That's what I'm trying to say. I think we do set goals from now until June. I definitely think we do that. And then we do it again in June. I'm just saying, when I was thinking through my thought process for what would be some good ideas for goals for Jeff from February to June, one of the things I had in my mind was that spring community dialogue, because we've all identified that having a community dialogue, well, I shouldn't say us all, the previous board had identified that as something we'd wanted to do. And so I know it was important. It's something we couldn't do with COVID. So that to me is a very important goal that me personally, that I think I want to accomplish. I want to see accomplished in the spring. So therefore I would want to put it on the February to June timeline. Does that make sense?
I don't think those 2 things are actually independent of one another. I think to Alicia's point, you can have a goal that's not going to be accomplished by June. I mean, most of this is not going to be accomplished by June. We saw the same thing with our own goals. We carried them over.
We carry them over.
We talk about where we've gotten with them, and you can tweak them from there. So from the bigger picture, there's no reason not to put a goal in that's not going to be done by June, but those really specific things can just be under that if there is something very specific that we want to see accomplished.
Okay, so what I had down is review the student handbooks for, and then I stopped typing. It was for the protocols, reporting protocols. Is that, or reporting procedures?
We had discussed that to ensure that there was inclusion in the handbook
Yes.
for the reporting procedures.
Okay.
And then the other discussion that we had in previous years was that the handbook needs to be looked at for consistency at phase levels, I guess, and within schools for disciplinary practices and responses and for like for homework, for example.
Responses.
Can I tell you what I have written? And see
Yes,
if it
please.
helps you at all?
Yes,
It
thank
may or may not, but I had just written down review implementation of student policies, strive for district-wide consistency, and inform the board of needed policy reviews, increase student and family awareness of student policies.
I mean, that sounds.
Is that getting at what you're?
Yeah,
I mean, and
I-
that we can put something specific to the handbook.
Yeah,
in
I
there,
think so.
too.
Can I just ask you to share your notes with me when we're done?
Mhm.
Because then I don't have to keep tracking. I can kind of think through.
Yep.
Okay, so read them to me one more time.
Read this to you one more
Yeah.
time. Review implementation of student policies, strive for district-wide consistency, and inform the board of needed policy reviews. Increase student and family awareness of student policies.
Okay, so that's 4 goals, right?
Well, it's 2 sentences, Shannon, so it's just. 2.
So 2 goals.
I don't know, and that's the thing, like, is it just one umbrella thing, and this is,
Yeah, maybe
sort
it's
of a
like the
couple of
one
things
umbrella
underneath
thing
it.
and that's the underneath piece. How
I guess
does-
I'm feeling like I don't want to get too specific, because I feel like Jeff's gonna have his own ideas of how to accomplish this.
Yes, I agree. I agree. How does that feel for?
I'm comfortable with the wording of that.
Yeah. You comfortable, John? Good, Jillian? Leanne, are you comfortable with that? Could you hear?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so that accomplishes goal 1, right? Or that gives us goals for Jeff under goal 1. Goal 2 is the collaborating with town council. To me, well, does anybody have thoughts on this? I don't want to speak out of turn.
I mean, I think Jeff's role in this is to maintain the relationship with the
Mhm.
town manager that he's already begun.
That's what I think as well. I think this is relationship with the town manager. And then my other thought too was the building steering committee. Yep. Maintaining and updating the building steering committee. Also getting that to working collaboratively with the town on that as well. Any thoughts on that, or does that sound? I'll let Kristen write it out and then tell us. Read it to us.
It's not coming that easily.
Does that sound reasonable? Is the appropriate word leading the building steering committee? Or is it participating? Participation on the building steering committee?
Yeah, I mean, it is a huge number of people.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No. Maybe guide and
Guiding.
advise.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big group of people.
Yeah. So guide and advise the the building steering committee. Continue to develop the relationship with the town manager. Which would then help with the working collaboratively, right, with town and school. Does that feel good? Sound good to everybody?
You just read it again.
Yeah. Can you read it one more time?
Thanks.
Did I write it?
I hope so.
I mean, I had written down, continue to build collaborative relationship with town manager and guide and advise the building steering committee.
Oh, that's great.
I think.
Yes.
Does the wording sound good? Leanne?
Yep.
All right, really quick, I know it's 7 o'clock. For number 3, which is the strengthen the student success. To me, I think that's where we have him establish the baseline, right? And to determine those benchmarks in math and reading. He report, we have in there that he'll report quarterly progress to us, including those benchmarks. But I think there's a third goal in there about the SEL work, right? The emotional component that. Is right here. Is the answer. So can you type this for me? So we're gonna he would determine the benchmarks for achievement in math and reading. Report quarterly progress to the board. And then do you think there should be something with I feel like something with the SEL should be in there too. What do we think?
I think that ties into Jeff's goal. Communicating with the community.
Mhm.
So I think we can kind of add that to like the priority list to communicate with the community. Discuss SEL.
Like to create the community dialogue.
Right.
Take that one down. Or host
Sorry.
the community dialogue.
Right,
Is
yeah.
that it? Yeah. All right. Did you get that one? Host the community. dialogue?
No, I'm sorry. I will do it. No, I was reading, I actually like on Jeff's goals that he had written under
Mhm.
number 3, the last bullet point.
Strengthening the social emotional learning through all developmental stages by implementing aligned curricula, meeting the social and emotional needs of our students in proactive ways, responding to those in crisis, and recognizing the importance of social and emotional health to overall well-being and success in school.
I think that pretty well sums up, right, what we're,
It's been a lot of work done in that area, and
Mhm.
between the Castle framework and panorama data that we have access to and will continue, I mean, there's a lot of alignment that's happened here already and is continuing to happen and strengthen that frankly isn't happening in other districts. It's really good work.
Oh, that's really good. So maybe we move, how do you guys feel about moving Jeff's goal over to ours as it's written? That last part, the strengthening the social emotional learning.
And I think tying that into community communication.
Yeah, I think that community dialogue is a
Yeah.
goal under there as well. Absolutely.
will you read the community dialogue to me again?
So it'd be to host a spring community dialogue session.
And that in and of itself isn't really a goal. It's more of an action step as part of a goal,
Mhm.
that I was attempting to articulate about establishing here's where we are and here's where we can go. And you do that, I can come up with an awesome mission statement and a vision, but that's mine. If it's not being actively developed with input from all parts of the community, then it's not shared and it's not really meaningful.
All right, so does the third feel good? The wording? Do you want to read it one more time?
We have determined benchmarks for achievement in math and reading.
Mhm.
Report quarterly progress to the board. Sorry, Leanne, my mic wasn't on. And then strengthening social emotional learning through all developmental stages by implementing aligned curricula, meeting the social and emotional needs of our students in proactive ways, responding to those in crisis, and recognizing the importance of social and emotional health to overall well-being and success in school. and then host spring community dialogue session.
Does that sound good? Does everybody feel good about that one? Leanne, how are you feeling? Good?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so I will, Kristen, if you can send those to me, I will get them out to everybody, and Jeff, I'll get those to you as well. Okay, sound good? All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on because we're after 7. All right. All right, so good evening and welcome to the regular business meeting of the Scarborough School Board of Education. The date is Thursday, February 3rd, 2022. May I have the attendance, please?
Mrs. Giftis,
Here.
Ms. Castellanos,
Here.
Mr. Kelleher,
Here.
Ms. Leong,
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Here.
Mr. Peony Huff. Here. Mrs. Turner,
Here.
Ms. Giftis,
Here.
and Ms. Bertulia.
Here.
Thank you. May I have everybody join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Agenda item 4.0 is adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments this evening?
No adjustments.
Agenda item 5.0 is public comment on agenda items. I know, Kelly, do you want to go ahead and read the one that we have? And I'll check the participants too. For our participants that are on, if you are interested in making comment, public comment, please raise your hand on the Zoom meeting. If you're unsure of how to do that, you can go to your name and then you can click, you can right click on it and you can raise your hand there. It's also an option in the reactions at the bottom screen as well. That's it.
This is from Sarah and Ethan McGrain. Good evening, board. I'm writing to continue to support making masking optional in Scarborough schools. We've all had the opportunity to receive the vaccine and to give it to our children, and we know that the cloth masks do not work. Why do we continue to force our children to wear masks all day long when adults who are more affected by COVID are allowed to go to sporting events, concerts, dinner, et cetera, and not mask? It continues to feel as though we have taken adult anxiety and pushed our fears onto our children. My kids comment that teachers are afraid of kids. Teachers get really angry at kids because their masks may have fallen down. The damage we are doing to our children day after day far outweighs the risk of COVID. We've all seen the reports on the increased suicide, self-harm, depression, and substance abuse that this pandemic has caused and what our so-called safety measures are doing to our children. Let the kids return to a sense of normalcy. My children want nothing more than to see their teachers and their friends smile again. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Kelly. Seeing no others here that are wishing to make public comment, just want to double check for our attendees. I don't see any there. So seeing no others, I will go ahead and close public comment for the evening. All right, agenda item 6.0 is our COVID update. So I'll turn this over to Jeff.
All right, and this is actually in the slides. It's part of the superintendent's report after the first slide. So I think we'll actually do the COVID update first. I want to turn the mic over to Diane. She's done some really cool work also with our IT department and I just wanted to highlight the COVID-19 info link that's right on the district website. If anyone in the public obviously clicks on that, now we get a kind of a graphical representation of case numbers and where we are. And it's super easy to read and also just gives you a good snapshot kind of where we are just in terms of positivity rates and just case count within the schools, within Scarborough schools. So I'll turn it over to Diane.
Great, thank you, Jeff. So as Jeff said, we have lots of data at this point that we can be mining and also wanting to make sure that we are being transparent with our community about where we're at.
And so we've had this COVID info page on the webpage, and this week I was able to spend some time really digging in and looking for a different way to share that information with our community. And so if you go to the link on our district page, so this is the live link right here. So now we're on the district page. You'll see a new section here in the right-hand side. And this is something that I am intending on updating on a weekly basis. And so this first chart here that you see is the total number of positive cases. And what we did was I used as a comparison the first 4 months of school from September to December 31st in blue. And each of the schools is represented. And then in red, you'll see where we were at for January. So I think the public is really aware that we had a surge of cases in January. And so that is just a visual representation of that. And then you can continue to click through. And so the second graph you see is the weekly reporting for the month of January. And so you'll see this is like our first week back. And then to the very far right, here's where we are this week. So, you know, it is certainly very promising to see that trend down. And then for people who are interested in what each of our schools look like, you can scroll through and see, starting with the high school, what January has looked like, the middle school, Wentworth School, Eight Corners, Pleasant Hill, and Blue Point. So again, hopefully our community will see that as a helpful source of information. Certainly we have been throughout this whole pandemic communicating on the weekly newsletter, but I felt like this could be of added value because it is something that is easily accessible on our website, and people don't have to dig through an email communication to take a look at where that information is. So in tomorrow's newsletter, that link will be included. And I've just pulled a couple of those graphs for tomorrow's newsletter. And then the intention would be that moving forward, we'll be directing people to this page versus a static graph or chart that would be on our newsletter. And again, just in case people haven't navigated to this page before, there is a lot of different kind of information on here. So a few weeks back, we had set up some communication forms for people to report positive cases. So that's there. We have information about our pooled testing for signups there, and then other resources, not just Scarborough resources, but also Maine CDC resources, standard operating protocols for the DOE. So if we go back, oh gosh, I thought that was going to happen. Let's see if I can go back to where we were. More easily said than done. Hang on, friends. Did we close out of that completely? All right. No worries. We will get back there. All right. So here we are again. And then I'm going to just bring that in. I should be able to bring that in on Zoom, right? Can people, Leanne, can you see this from home? Can you see the slide deck? Perfect. Great. Thank you very much. Just want to make sure that folks at home can see what we see. So I'm just going to have to navigate back to where we were. And so that was, that's a big piece of information that we wanted to share with you this evening. The other piece of information, again, the metrics that, that we continue to look at. One of the other pieces is our vaccination rates. And so this is taken right from the Maine CDC website from yesterday. So this is very recent. If you go onto the website, this is actually an interactive map, which is really neat because you can hover over each of the individual communities to see what their vaccination rate is. And these are estimates that the Maine CDC has made based on what's been reported to them about people who live at our zip code that have received at least one dose of vaccine. So that's another piece of information that we wanted to share this evening. And then the third piece of information, and again, on each of these pages, I have linked to the direct websites. So hopefully once the slide deck is shared, people can go through and navigate on their own time and take more time to do that if that interests you. This comes from a link from the US CDC website. So if you navigate to the US CDC website, you can put in any county in the United States, and it will show you the level of community transmission. So here's Maine, and Maine, this is Cumberland County right here. And so Maine is high. And then this piece, although I took a snapshot of it, you can literally in real time dial back or forward to find out about the number of cases reported each day. So for the purpose of this evening, I just used our school year to date as a piece of information. So that's just an update on the data in terms of where we are. Hopefully that's helpful.
I just have a quick question, if that's, you don't mind. Sure. What's on the website for COVID reporting? That's all pool testing. Does it also include all the home tests?
Yes, that's a great question. So the charts that you see include all of the positive cases. So those are not representative of just things that we've gotten from pool testing. Those are all of the things that have been reported to our school nurses. So those might be at this point, because that scope has broadened. That would include laboratory tests or tests received from a medical facility that have been reported to us. That includes Binax Now tests that we found as a result of pool testing. It also includes at-home tests that parents have administered to their children or that staff have taken, and that we have become aware of those positive tests. So that is a pretty complete assessment of what our cases look like. Sure.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
I just want to say, I think that's really cool. I like that, and that'll be very useful. Good, quick glance. Thanks.
Yeah, I do think it's very cool. I like that it's there. I think it's easily accessible. We can kind of see the numbers as they're trending down. As we start to trend down and we start to look at our next phase of this, is there, Jeff, do you want to mention or talk about maybe the metrics that are out there that have been?
Sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of communities that are thinking, okay, when will it be okay to drop a universal mask mandate? And obviously the Maine CDC and the recommendation is still, at least currently, given the high transmission rates, specifically in Maine and in Cumberland County, as Diane just shared. The recommendation is to continue with the universal masking requirement. What would it look like? So there's certainly a lot of people asking that, and it's getting more and more as cases drop too. And a lot of the frameworks that are at least being shared publicly with boards around here have to do, and it's one of the reasons why we kind of set up some of the COVID data tonight around vaccination rates and then community transmission. So right now, the federal CDC has actually added a fourth category. So the categories, not quite sure why, but anyway, it's now high, substantial, moderate, and low, based on cases per 1,000 people. And so what has been shared or discussed, across some districts is, what if you were in the moderate category for community transmission, and then you had, an exceedingly high benchmark for vaccination rates among students, staff, and the community. And those two metrics combined, would that then, would you then revisit whether, a different policy on masking where it wouldn't be universally required for all students and staff? If you hit, moderate, a moderate transmission in a community, and then you had a certain percentage of people vaccinated. So that's what has been or is continuing to be discussed publicly, is, some of those what ifs. As far as we know, we haven't had any solid benchmarks proposed, from the CDC or from Maine CDC, but those are just some of the things that are being discussed among superintendents and with boards in different places. So.
I have a question about that. So as superintendents, you're discussing this, is there any communication with the state about, should you as superintendents choose to be in an optional sort of place, that they will remove the link between universal masking and close contact quarantining? Because that universal masking exempts us
Right.
from a lot of that. So is there communication with the state at this point about sort of uncoupling those two things, so we can keep kids in school and have mask optional at some point?
Again, it ultimately, ideally, the CDC would lead, and say, and come to those conclusions. I'm just, what I'm sharing is speculation, right? And I think there have been some districts that have deviated from the CDC, whether it's the SOP specifically on masking in the fall, and have had some, tough situations as a result of that, and then having to backtrack and revisit whether or not masks should be optional or required, right? So, and that's played out publicly as well. So, I don't know. I mean, I can't answer that question. That's obviously for the governor and for Maine CDC and DOE to address. But
Okay, thank you.
those things are actively being discussed for sure in different communities, what I mentioned.
So I have a question on the mitigation strategies that we're currently using. So we have universal masking, but then we also have pooled testing, but we're also not required to contact trace anymore. So is there really a need for pooled testing to be done anymore? So I feel like that also drives up our data when we're also accepting home tests too.
The pooled, what I was really encouraged by is that the pooled testing data mirrors kind of the overall data, particularly in this past month. So for example, like when we are reporting a lot of positive cases in any school, the school's also reporting a higher number of positive pools. So what that's telling us is that, number one, we have enough people who are part of the pooled testing that is representative of, that is doing its job, right? That we're catching cases quickly and then mitigating, exposure or mitigating any transmission as a result of that. So to me, that gives us information that pooled testing as a mitigation strategy is doing what it's supposed to do.
And again, I would just add that, pooled testing is something that people opt into. And at this point, out of about a combined 3,600 staff and students, we have 1,800 people that chose to be in pooled testing. So, I think that says that, oh, half, 50% of our community felt like that was a mitigation strategy that they were interested in. I also think that it is that tests are not widely available outside of school and in the community. And so there is a confidence for those people who sign up for pool testing that they feel like they, continue to be well.
And to Jenna's point about the inflated numbers, the people that are testing through pool testing, if we find that they're positive, and for whatever reason, they also tested home. So we would have 2 positive tests. They would not be counted twice. They would only be counted once for purposes of COVID numbers. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And then I wanted to go back to Kristen's point. The CDC, so there's been, I just want to be sure I heard correctly, there's been no discussion about uncoupling the guidance from at the CDC level, main CDC level, about uncoupling the guidance or the standard operating procedures from the exemptions for quarantine for close contacts. Is that a correct or accurate statement?
Meaning that if you decide to go it alone, can you just ignore the SOP and those kind of things?
No, because to me, the way I understand it through my research and reading is if you, as not you, but if a district decides to follow the standard operating procedures, therefore you follow them, therefore, when we have close contacts, these are the exemptions to quarantine we can follow because we are following the standard operating procedures.
Yeah,
Right. So it's almost like, I think I've used this a few times. Guidance is, I think for some people, it sounds like guidance sounds like an invitation to do what you want, but in reality, you follow the procedures because this is what you follow the procedures so that you can have the exemptions. I mean, of course, we keep people safe, right? That's number one priority, but we are able to abide by these exemptions because we're following the procedures.
well, I mean, the universal masking is really what we're talking about.
Yes.
And so if we're universally masking as a district,
Mhm.
then we're allowed to follow that quarantine
Yes.
exemption and the contact tracing exemption.
Right.
So that's the incentive on the side of the main CDC to encourage communities to adopt a universal masking policy.
Correct. So has there been any conversation at the CDC level that you're aware of to where they will uncouple those? So that the guidance is truly guidance and then there's no implications on the exemption side for the.
So a
quarantine.
district could just do whatever they could adopt a universal masking requirement and then still get all the exemptions?
Yes. Has that been discussed that you know of?
Not that I know of. It wouldn't
Okay.
make much sense to, I would think, but.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm getting at is there's no way in my mind, there's no way for a district to go at it alone. There's no way for a district to go against what the CDC is saying and keep kids in school, majority of kids in school.
Well, you would no longer have that exemption if
Right.
you were to go.
Right, so then we would have more kids at home because we would have to go back to contact tracing. Let's just say that we decided right now that Monday is mask optional. If we did that, we would then be required to quarantine. We would lose those exemptions for close contacts. And we would have to start contact tracing again. Correct?
Again, you'd have to look at the list for the
Mhm.
exemptions. So for example, if you were unvaccinated, yes.
Yes.
Quarantine would
Mhm.
go into effect. If you are vaccinated, you are not required to quarantine.
Right.
So, and then to kind of just loop back to your earlier question, I think what you were really asking was, do we have any information that the SOP is under revision right now and going to change? And the answer to that is no.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Jeff or Diane or?
So I
Go ahead.
guess when can we bring this back to voting on mask option or mask mandate?
I think I think the question would be, are we prepared as a board to not follow the operating procedures, right? The CDC operating procedures. That's kind of where I'm going with my questions. If we choose to, if we as a whole board were supportive of doing that, what are the ramifications of doing that? And the ramifications are that we lose those quarantine exemptions and we lose those contact tracing exemptions. So that's the bigger question. Is the board even interested in entertaining that thought? And that, to answer your question, that would be when we would, because otherwise, if the board's not interested in entertaining that, then we would vote, we could vote, but the answer would be no, right? We would vote it down as a whole, as a board.
I would just also add that last year during this as well, the board went into a memorandum of understanding with the SEA around following Maine CDC and DOE protocols. And so the other part of deviating from Maine CDC, as well as, you know, the SOP with respect to masking, that would be another thing that I would be concerned about with the staff, certainly with our staff.
So my other question too, because Diane, you had mentioned that with, as long as you're vaccinated, if the student is vaccinated, they wouldn't need to quarantine. But would that still be in play if we had a mask option? Instead of a mask mandate?
So if you look within that SOP document, which
Mhm.
is linked into, onto that COVID page that I was navigating with all of you earlier, I believe it's close to the bottom of the page under other resources. Within that standard operating protocol, the state has established a table that describes the circumstances under which people are subject to quarantine or not subject to quarantine. And so universal masking is one of those that, right, like it checks all the boxes and nobody is subject to quarantine. And then you have other situations like someone's vaccination status, somebody's participation in pooled testing, et cetera. And so, you know, you would really want to, you know, to spend some time taking a look at that to help you and to, you know, to help you understand the circumstances under which, you know, what would apply to whom.
Yeah, I think the question I was just getting at was just because the standard operating procedures are constantly changing. You know, I would like to have a board discussion on the next steps then. I know I'm ready to have that discussion, but you had mentioned, you know, we're not sure if everyone is ready to have that discussion.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of is the board as a whole, because we would all be voting, right? It's not, we can't just have, it can't be one person, right? It has to be everybody. And it's more a question of, is the board in a place where they're ready to, for lack of a better term, step out on their own with this, right? And to do this without the support of the Maine CDC or the Maine DOE. And that's really the bigger question here. Because for me, like I can tell you for me personally, when Jeff presented the back to school plan and we had that discussion as a board at that time, my number one priority is, of course, keeping our kids healthy and safe. But my secondary priority to that was, let's get as many kids back in person as we can, because we knew remote wasn't necessarily the best for every student, right? So if my goal is let's keep as many as we can in school, then for me personally, when we're navigating away from what the CDC is giving us in the way of exemptions, then I'm kind of going backward then, right? Because I have to say, well, yeah, let's go at this alone. But then if you don't fall into the one exemption category we now would be eligible to potentially use, which is the vaccinated category, you have to stay home if you're a close contact. So then we have more kids out of school, and then that defeats the purpose of allowing kids the opportunity for in-person learning. It defeats the purpose for allowing kids to participate in sports and extracurricular activities and all of the other things that we were able to give them back this year. So that's my personal concern with it. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts. Let me check with Leanne, see if she's got her.
I mean, I think this is not an action item for tonight, correct?
No, it's
So, I mean, I'm not really prepared to dive deep into it, you know?
I guess then, other towns are talking about off-ramp procedures, and I don't know if you had anything to update on us on that today.
That's what I was doing. Yeah. Other than what I've said, yeah.
I mean, I think I'm at a little bit of a loss. I guess we could put it on a future agenda. Again, and that could be a discussion point at that time. I think that before we did anything, sorry, Leanne, I didn't have my microphone on. I mean, I am not even sure how our community feels about this. I'm not, I don't know that we even have anything to support entertaining it. So I'm a little on the fence there. So I wonder, is this something that we survey the parents about and the community about? Is there an interest in even entertaining this thought? I'm just not sure how we word it to be very clear, because again, I think part of the conundrum people have is they hear the word guidance and it sounds like it's something we can choose to follow. Right. And we certainly can choose to follow, but the ramifications of not following are not quite understood, if that I don't feel is not quite understood. So even if we surveyed the community, how would we do it in a way that got the point across that if we chose to do this, if we were even going to entertain this, going at it alone, the ramifications are this, and would you support that? How do we get that? How do we even make that clear statement? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think surveying the community would be helpful, but I think surveying the community back before school began would have been more helpful. So I think at this point, I'd be concerned also with how it's worded to get the right answers. And I guess what public needs to really know is what are the ramifications?
Mhm.
If we don't follow the guidelines, then what do we what are the consequences of it?
Mhm.
And I think we do absolutely need to make that really clear, so that we're not getting any sort of confusion coming in, or we can also get continued support to maybe add pressure to other administrations to get this moving forward.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we can't go backward about the surveys at the beginning, right? So we can focus on moving forward, but I think in addition, like I'm just thinking through. So we survey the community and parents, we also would have to survey teachers and staff and get their input as well, right? And then, am I leaving anybody out? Parents, community, teachers and staff?
Students and. I mean,
Students, yes. Yeah, so make sure we have all the stakeholders input before, instead of just one group, right? We would really, I would think, want to hear from everybody. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just that there are a lot of moving parts to this, we do have a contract, we do have the CDC. I do want to see us have this conversation, but I think maybe it would be helpful if, because I wasn't really prepared for this conversation in this meeting, but to maybe gather our thoughts and see what information we need and figure out where all of those parts are and know what our options are before we keep having this conversation. Like I think, again, there are a lot of moving parts and I don't think any of us are prepared to cover off on all of them right now, but I think maybe that's our goal, to start trying to define what we're missing, to have an informed conversation about it.
So maybe that's our next step before a survey is what you're saying? Like before we even go down that road and ask questions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I hesitate to put a survey out, and it makes me worried that we're going to put a survey out and not be prepared or in a position to respond in the way that the community would expect. If they give us feedback and we can't react to it, I don't know why we would want to do that. It feels like setting up. Yeah, like exactly. And I mean, of course I would love the information, but I don't want to get it and be like, oh, everybody wants this. It's too bad we can't do it.
Well, And I mean, we just voted on this a few weeks ago and the superintendent's recommendation was approved unanimously by this board. So I don't know why we're having that discussion right now when none of the guidance that formulated that recommendation or the basis for us approving it unanimously has changed. I think that it's premature until we have a true change of circumstance. Because, I mean, what I don't want to do is continue to spin our wheels and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And we just had this vote, we just had this conversation, and all of the data that supports it remains the same. So
Are there any other comments or suggestions right now?
I mean, it's not an action item. We were here for an update. So, I mean, I think we've got an update. We had a good debate. That's where I'm at this point.
Okay, and maybe in the meantime, we can, Jeff and I and Diane, Jeff and I can start thinking, like to Kristen's point about what do we not know? What are the missing pieces? And let's kind of see if we can flesh those out a little bit more. Does that sound good? All right, So we'll carry on. Agenda item 7.0 is superintendent's report and 7.1 is remote snow days.
And that's, like I said in the slides, the slides have our COVID numbers and COVID update, and then a slide on agenda item and new business, which is a proposal from our leadership council and Colt for remote learning days. And this really emanated out of plans that we were putting together with faculty and staff around a short term, particularly with the surge that hit us first in December and then into January, is making sure that we were ready for essentially a short term remote learning, right? So whether it was, we were anticipating, well, if we do have a surge, hopefully it would be a very short period of time when kids are out of school. But we need to be ready for that. So there was discussions at all phase levels. And then obviously we came off of winter break and ended up having to go, or making the decision to go remote at the high school for 4 days. Given we had close to 20% of our kids out due to illness. And then also a huge escalation of COVID cases in that given week. So anyway, what also came out of that was, this is actually something that I had implemented in a previous district last year when we were already kind of remote and didn't have to make up the end of it. And when you had a snow day, you didn't have to make up any days at the end, right? Because we had the state waiver and all those things. However, the concern was, all right, we have a snow day. Do you have a traditional snow day? And if so, just because you don't have to make it up at the end, you're still losing some instruction, right? So what we decided was to kind of meet in the middle and say, okay, well, if we have, let's have 3 traditional snow days. And then after that, if we had any further weather related days that would interrupt the hybrid schedule and all that kind of stuff, then those would become remote learning days, and given all the work that all districts have had to do to educate kids remotely, why don't we then use all those skills that we've developed to our advantage. So in talking about it with the calendar, now that again we're back to there's 177, you have to maintain a minimum of 175 student days, all those typical restrictions that were gone last year, those waivers are gone, so the calendar stays intact. We were talking about, okay, well, if we're ready to go short-term remote learning, what if instead of making up every single snow day at the end, tacking it on in June, once we got past a certain number of, quote, traditional snow days that would then get tacked on as an additional day in June, when we hit 3, after that, each subsequent snow day, instead of again tacking it onto June and getting further into June, transition to a remote learning day. And so we've worked together with staff at all phase levels to be ready for that. And so the proposal that we'd like to bring to the board, and again, this would require board approval because it would, if we were to extend beyond the 3 days, number one, we didn't need a board approved, this is what a remote learning day looks like. And then number 2, we would be making an adjustment to the calendar in the sense that we wouldn't be extending into that next week. So just to read what the actual proposal is, Leadership Council and Central Office team has been communicating with staff, SEA leadership and faculty members to be prepared for short-term closures and remote learning days. We're seeking board approval to amend the current calendar, so this would be for this school year, to allow for a remote learning day in the event school buildings need to close for weather-related emergencies. The current practice is to add an additional day to the end of the projected last day of school in June for any weather-related closure or snow day. So our proposal would amend that current practice to allow for a remote learning day once we've exceeded 3 snow days or weather-related closures. On the 4th or any subsequent snow day beyond 3, Scarborough students in all grades would complete schoolwork remotely and therefore avoid any additional days added at the end of the school year in June. Teachers will be ready to provide low tech and no tech work options. So for example, if we were to lose power, right, or anything like that, you still want to be able to substantiate that day as a learning day. And again, this would look very different depending if you were in kindergarten or 11th grade or 8th grade, whatever it is. Work options at all levels to ensure learning activities are available for all students during a remote learning day. And this would also mean for the 2021-2022 school year, the last day of school, even if we were to exceed that total of 3 snow days during the year, would be Friday, June 17th, 2022. I will say that if I were to roll this back a couple months, and again, some of this, there's a degree of urgency given that we've already had 2 closures, and my phone's been buzzing like a maniac, particularly in the last couple hours, to make this call now as opposed to waiting till 4 o'clock in the morning. So, which would then be our 3rd snow day. So I you know, probably would have taken the time to you know, get more feedback from parents and from students and faculty. Like I know I had to send out a kind of a last minute email to the high school staff because of how everything went down in early January. Didn't really get their feedback while the other schools were planning for what a remote day would look like. So they got a little bit of a last minute email at the beginning of this week. Hey, what do you think of this idea? Where, you know, typically it would have been done a lot earlier. But at any rate, you know, that if we were to do this year, now is the time obviously to do it because we're already up against the 3 days. So that's the proposal. I think it makes sense. I think it's a good one. You know, the feedback, the bulk of the feedback that we've gotten from staff all the way through the different phases has been positive. Like they like the idea, and they've also spent time and are ready for that 4th day and what that would look like. Anyway, so I don't know, Diane, if you want to add anything to that, or that's the proposal.
All right, do we have questions? Comments? Yeah, go ahead, John.
I have a question. Well, I love the idea. I think it's great because I've seen things and heard things from people that they're concerned and they think that kids should be just added at the end of the year. And it's not like you're going to add tomorrow and tomorrow's work to the end of the year and it's going to get done. They're just going to push it to Monday and they're going to do it then. And then that day at the end of the year is just going to be kind of almost wasted, or at least in my opinion, because I remember when I was in school and I know it wasn't that long ago, you know, really.
As you get further into June, right?
Exactly. Nobody wants to do that. But let's say we do this. Is there going to be any penalty for children that don't complete work? Is there going to be a problem if they don't get everything done, or if they can't get everything done? Because some people, you know, obviously we found out that they work better in the classroom than they do at home, and they don't, you know, they don't struggle as much. Will there be an issue with that?
That's a really good question. And actually it did come up in that very question came up in the instructional leadership team meeting. I was at the high school and they were talking about that, you know, because different kids, you know, you may have one part of Scarborough that loses power for a couple of days or whatever, you know, and you got a remote learning day. So number one, the low tech, no tech means that it's an asynchronous day. You know, there's not, you know, and as far as it's going to be making sure that kids have work to do, and obviously if you can check in with your teachers and all that, and as much as that can happen will happen, but there's going to be a degree of flexibility put in place, particularly, you know, for students who, if they can't get the work done that day for valid reasons, and then, you know, it's you know, it's, and then again, that's the you know, degree of autonomy, you know, between students and teachers, but yeah, there would need to be some flexibility built in on those days for sure. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Was any consideration given to putting a cap on how many days we would do this way? I mean, let's hope we don't have an excessive amount, but I do have concerns. Like, what if schools had no power for 5 days? And at some point, it's going to be an excessive amount of days that we're counting as instructional days that aren't really instructional days. So would we limit them?
You know, usually if you have an excessive number of days, there's some crazy event, right?
Yeah.
Where you like lose a power for a week and a half, and then, you know, and then one or two things happen. Either you get a specialized waiver,
Okay.
you know, from the state, or you know, from the DOE, or you adjust the school calendar. I mean, this has never happened where I've been in a district, but you know, there have been times where districts have chosen to, you know, give up like a vacation week or add some
Mhm.
days in different places to try and make that up. Or another one that's happened too is, you know, elongating the school day for a little bit, which gets really messy because then you've got to change, you know, teacher. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are a mess, but I wouldn't anticipate that really being an issue unless there was like some huge extended special circumstance that, you know, that would likely require us to be working with the state anyway to adjust our calendar.
So
You
what
know.
is our like comfortable amount? Like, are we good with 5 more days being remote? Like, I guess this feels so open-ended to me.
What's the most you've ever gone past?
I
I
was
don't- I have
gonna
no
say, I
idea.
think
I have no
I
idea.
think if we took a look at over time, the average
Would it-
number
yeah.
of days we've incurred has been 5 or less, right? Which
Okay.
is why generally when the calendar is looked at, it's looked at in that way.
The other thing
Thank you.
the other thing that I will mention on that issue too is that the other thing that Scarborough has available to it is because we have an approved calendar with 177 days, which is 2 days more than what's required,
Yep.
175. The board could also, like, and this happens sometimes, you know, if the last day of school is on a Monday, you know,
Yeah.
the board can vote to drop that day and have it end on the Friday the week before, because we have 177 student days. So there's still those 2 extra days built in as well.
We still have those
Yeah.
as of
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if tomorrow's a snow day, will that make the 3rd day?
Tomorrow would be the 3rd day.
And the proposal is to not only address the need for tomorrow, but to address this practice in general in a long-term response to snow days?
My thought would be, and I think a lot of folks in administrative positions share this too, is that it's nice having that hard stop where you know, okay, we're going to go 3 days beyond what the last day of school on the calendar is, and we're not going to go any further than that. You know, that helps for a lot of different reasons on the staff side and also on the parent and family side as well. So yeah, I would look at this as something that would be a practice that would go into, you know, future calendar conversations.
So what we're being asked to approve tonight is like long-term or just for this year?
Just
and
for
then
this year.
And so that will be taken up at a different
Right, and
time.
that's why I mentioned there's the urgency there,
Yeah.
you know? So, and which I understand, people, whoa, wait a minute, you know, and it would, you know, and of course, Murphy's Law says that tomorrow will be the last weather-related closure and none of this will matter, but, you know.
Yeah, and I think long-term, that would be a discussion at policy meetings, right? Our next meeting is actually intended, I'm sure Leanne will cover this. So I apologize in advance, Leanne, but it will be the discussion of the calendar, right? So we would have an opportunity to talk about this in a more long-term way there. And I will say for me personally, I also think it's a great idea because logistically speaking, yes, it's nice to have this hard end date. I think that in my mind, it would allow teachers to actually plan a little bit better if they knew that this is the last day and now they can plan accordingly, you know, with a hard stop. And if we have remote days in, it allows students to continue learning. Is it the best way for everybody? Maybe not, but it allows them to continue working on their assignments right now versus adding the extra days at the end of the year when they're, you know, potentially not as robust instructional days. Maybe that's the best way to word it. So I do like it. What my piece I hesitate on and where I struggle a little bit is that we haven't asked parents yet what they think. So this is new. I don't say that to say that we should necessarily throw this out. I just say that as a, as a caution. And to your point, like if this had been 2 months earlier, yeah, we could have done, we could have done those things, right? So I guess I just more wanted to say that out loud. And maybe if nothing else, this gives us an opportunity to see how this would work in real life before we make the decision for next year as well. Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
Will there be, I don't know if you said this, will there be like optional office hours for kids to connect with teachers for work that's being done or not? I mean, I just am curious.
I mean, what we're looking at it as an asynchronous day, you know, and if there are opportunities to do that, and then you start to get into kind of equity issues and other things, but we're really designing it, and teachers have looked at this as like that asynchronous day for the most part. And what, you know, it plays out a little differently depending on what levels you are, right? Because, you know, by 6th grade, you get to middle school and high school, for the most part, almost all teachers and students are on Google Classroom, and that's obviously much different than if you're in 2nd grade or 1st grade, that kind of thing. So it plays out a little differently, those remote days, depending on the phase level. But we want to again try and keep that continuity through that day as much as possible. And then it's weighing that in a teacher's mind. It's really been, I think, about managing how much can you get done with students during a remote instruction day like that versus the added day added on right at the end of the year, which, depending on how far you go into June, can have implications for attendance, can have implications for, you know, how engaged the kids are at that point, you know, all those things. So it's kind of a wash in some ways. And again, the number of times that you go well beyond 3 days into 5, 6, 7 territory, you know, it's not like, you know, this is a you know, would be a school going remote remote for a significant period of time, right? It's 1 day here, 1 day there, at the most, probably in a given year.
Wait, so tomorrow would be what you're proposing is tomorrow would be a remote learning day? No, only
Yeah,
after tomorrow.
After June.
Okay.
Right, tomorrow would be a traditional snow day, just like the last 2. So but it would be the 3rd.
So then anything thereafter, if this is approved, anything after tomorrow would be
Yeah, I agree.
remote.
Right.
Leanne, I see your hand.
Thanks, Shannon. Jeff, I should know this and I can't find anything to like substantiate it. I believed that there was a rule that you had to have a certain percentage of students attend for it
No.
to count as a day. How would we ensure that we had that attendance number as well as the 3 hours of work to ensure that it was an actual day?
So, I mean, at every phase level, there would be a mechanism to take attendance virtually. So students would be, and families would be expected to do that. And then is the benchmark 80%?
I don't want to get voted on that. I don't have that.
I'd have to look, but I
know.
believe the benchmark is 80%. So if I'm wrong, then I'll look it up and correct it. But no, yes, that is an expectation to have some way to substantiate that you've got acceptable attendance and engagement on those remote days.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. What you said about the urgency, and I get that without being able to like survey the parents and stuff, but I do recall last year, I think we did do a survey when we had this same discussion, and I feel like the results that's why we didn't do this last year, because the parent survey, at least that's why I recall, like parents and student survey. So I'm just a little concerned on their perspective, because I've heard, we were talking about it today in advisory, and students, they want the snow day. Like, so some people said they want it, some people said they didn't. And I just wonder what the feedback would be from others.
Yeah, you can't survey seniors because
Yeah.
y'all don't need to make it up in June. So we're leaving you out.
Yeah, because you would be gone. I don't recall.
The challenge
We didn't do
comparing last year to this year, though I will say is that you don't have to make, last year because of the waiver, there was no making up the days at the end. So, but this year, that's a very real thing. So if you don't have a board approved, okay, we're doing a remote learning day, then that day needs to get made up at the end, regardless of how many you have. Yeah.
I think my concern with this is just going remote. It's just going to trigger some PTSD for some of us, like myself. I mean, teaching from home with kids at home, it makes it difficult from a teacher's perspective, and then kids just wanting to have the snow day. And, that's the only place where I'm hesitant about it, just because we're going remote when it can just be a snow day.
Well, again, I'll just remind, it's not designed to be like people are on Zoom all day with their teachers, so there isn't an expectation of synchronous instruction. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that that's clear.
Are we having a discussion after a motion is made when we get?
Well, if we're doing it here, we certainly can.
This is the superintendent's report.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, we can certainly.
That's why that's why it's my only slide other than the COVID stuff.
What we can do is we can stop it for now and then move on, and that'll give maybe, people more time to think through questions they might have, and we'll talk about it again at the, when we get to new business. Does that feel good to everybody? Leanne, good? All right.
I'll let my report rest.
Perfect. All right. Agenda item 8.0 is the chair's report. First, I wanted to thank you so much, Kelly, for laminating our code of ethics. I thought this was a really cool idea that Melissa Huey gave us at our workshop last week. And Leanne, we will get you yours. But she laminated for us our code of ethics that we could keep, everybody have their own copy. So thank you so much, Kelly. I really appreciate that. And thank you to everybody. I know I just wanted to really acknowledge all of you. I know we've had meeting after meeting with workshops, and it's been a lot of stuff going on. To Alicia's point, there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts right now. And I just really appreciate everybody's hard work. I know we're asking a lot right now. And I'm hoping in March we'll slow down and get back to normal. I should probably knock on wood as I say that. All right, and then the rest of my chair's report, we later in new business are going to be voting on our board goals on our operating protocol that we agreed to through our various workshops and meetings, and then what we adjusted that one tonight, this evening. So I'm not going to reread these to you because I know you've seen them a lot. But with our board operating protocols, there's 13 of them that we carried over from last year, and we all agreed to do that this year. So no changes there. And you can see them here. The next one was our 3 goals that we set out. And again, I'm not going to read them because we've read through them ad nauseum, and we just looked through them again. And you see number 1 has been updated. I'm sorry, can you go back one really quick, Diane?
It won't show the update.
Oh, it does. Yeah, because you came out of it, remember?
Yes.
Yeah, so
I
it
did. Aren't
was-
you glad I made that mistake?
Yes, you did it on purpose. You did
It was planned.
yes. It was very purposeful. You can see the first action item is updated to show that annual review of the school handbooks and governance reporting structure that we discussed at our meeting. Everything else is the same. And then our second goal is to continue to collaborate with town council. And you can see our action items there are the same. And then our third is to continue to strengthen student success, achievement, and well-being through ongoing development in all subject areas, district-wide student support opportunities, social emotional learning, and through district-wide DEI work. And so these were the 4 action items that we came up with under that. So we are going to vote on these under new business. So if there's any discussion, we can do that then. But are there any questions for me on the goals or the protocol, the operating protocol? Okay. All right, agenda item 9.0 is committee reports. I know I'm gonna start with Alicia, because I don't want to overlook negotiations because I know you said you didn't need a slide. So we're gonna go ahead and start with you and then we'll move on to finance. So Alicia, if you want to do negotiations.
Okay, thank you. So I've been giving you some updates along the way. As you know, negotiations are a confidential process, so we can't provide as much information as would be helpful, but I can bring you up to speed on the ed tech contract. As you know, the board approved that contract on October 21st of 2021. On January 23rd of this year, we heard from the administration of the SEA that the ESP SEA members had voted yes to ratify that contract. So that was on January 23rd. We're just waiting now for the administration of the SEA to sign that contract so that the ed techs can get, their contracts in their hands. So that's now moved along a little bit. We are in the process of negotiating the custodian and food services contract. We are also in the middle of impact bargaining on the terms of the COVID impact to the teacher's contract. So we're bargaining that contract. And the teacher's contract is due to expire this year. So we do need to get started with that process. The board did send out dates to the SEA where the board is available to begin the negotiation process. We're just waiting to hear back from the union with dates, and we'll begin that process hopefully soon. I know that the last go around, it took a long time and it was extended past the contract deadline. So we are hoping to get a jump start on that so that we don't find ourselves in that predicament with teachers without a signed contract. I know that that's a really stressful situation. So we're hoping to get moving, and a lot of moving parts, but we are meeting diligently with all of these multiple contracts.
Thank you, Alicia. Are there any questions for Alicia? Negotiations? All right, I think finance is next.
Yeah, so we last met January 13th. Jeff, Diane, Lee, and Kristen and I met with Kate. We reviewed fiscal year 2022 quarterly reports, and they can be found on the website under the finance committee. We were updated that we're seeing some revenue from athletic activities and continued food sales at the high school. And we also discussed the importance of filling out those optional lunch forms. So as people are thinking about kindergarten registration, that's going to be coming up too, and something that we'll probably be promoting and reminding everyone to do. And then Jeff also went over the update he provided to the board in December on turf and track. And it seems as though things are still in line unless things, supply chain issues happen. But for now, everything is set to go for now. And our next meeting will be on February 10th at 4:30.
Thank you, Jenna. Any questions for Jenna? Good. All right, Leanne, it's your turn for policy.
Well, we've talked quite a bit about policy tonight. We had our meeting on the 11th, and we began the review of the changes to policy JKAA, which is the use of physical restraint and seclusion. There are very few changes left to be made, so we're hoping to finish that up at our next meeting, which is February 8th, with the primary topic to be the 2022-2023 school calendar.
Very exciting. Any questions or comments for Leanne or policy? All right, Jillian, communications.
We met yesterday. We discussed continuing to try to get some communication out to, about the various things with the BSC, yes, thank you, Building Steering Committee. I was trying to get that out. And how we were going to do that. And other than that, our next meeting is a month from yesterday at 4:30, and they meet every first Wednesday of the month.
Thank you, Jillian. Any questions for Jillian? All right, John, curriculum.
We met on the 12th of January. Most of the meeting was spent just, everybody, because it was our first meeting, introducing each other. Monique was nice enough to put a slideshow presentation together, introducing us to the curriculum process. It's pretty informative. Actually, she did a really good job, so very happy with that. We discussed just future action items that the board has coming up. And we're going to be meeting the second Wednesday of every month, so next Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And that'll be going forward every meeting.
Thank you, John.
Oh, yes.
Any questions for John? All right, Kristen. Building committee.
On January 26th, the building committee as a full group was back together again, which was really great. Harriman led the meeting. They had this really great presentation that had a big overview of how the school project is going to move forward. There's a ton of information in it. We talked about potential timelines, potential subcommittees, and the steps we need to take to get to referendum. The next meeting is on the 15th, and we're going to be talking in greater detail about the site selection, which I know we've all been anxiously awaiting. And then later tonight, we do have an action item to vote on new members to the committee. So the Building Steering Committee is recommending that we add an additional town councilor, 2 additional K2 teachers and staff members, the community service directors, Todd Souza, and then a new member from facilities. A lot of this is just as it progresses, we're going to need more input from these various groups. The additional town councilor really is because we are trying to get greater collaboration with the town, and we think a new council member will add a lot of benefit to that. So we will be asking all of you to support these new positions on the committee. Any questions on any of that? No, okay.
Thank you, Kristen. And town liaisons, does anybody have a town liaison report? Didn't see any, just wanted to double check.
I didn't put it in there, and it's because I think I've already reached out to all of you that the town council was working on their goals. They approved them last night, but it was really nice to see that one of their goals does include, a focus on school facility needs. So I'm appreciative that they put that in there, and it was really nice to see.
All right. Thank you for our committee updates. Agenda item 10.0 is student representative reports. We'll start with Yulia.
On the first slide is mostly just a lot of pictures of kids at 8 Corners having fun. They participated in a lot of things in the SLO this past month. On the next slide is Pleasant Hill. They have a board with a lot of the teachers with their elementary school pictures, and every month they update which teacher is whose picture. And they're also learning a lot of the fundamentals of working with clay. On this slide is Wentworth's finalists for the yearbook cover. There's 10 of them. And finally, Wentworth has an exciting new edition of the greenhouse. Okay, so the sixth graders at the middle school had a social and emotional learning activity of going outside and playing in the snow. There was also some winter activities inside for kids who didn't want to go outside. And there was sledding, some kids brought snowboards, hanging out with friends. And I know as a sixth grader, one thing I missed was recess. So I bet this was something that really got these kids excited and was just a break from school, which was needed. It looks like a lot of fun. I wish we did that at high school. And then at the high school, Unified Basketball had our first home game last Friday against South Portland. We did win, and some of the top scorers were Michaela Weed and Trey Spillman. And it was a great game, and we actually had a crowd this time compared to last year where there's no crowd. Kids got going. One girl hypes up the crowd, tells them it's so cute. And it's just such a fun environment to be a part of. And I'll keep you guys updated how the season goes. And also this past week at the high school, we've had Detective Royale from the Maine State Police. He's a special investigator in the computer crimes unit. And he ran a workshop for us on cyber safety. And he told us some stories about what he's worked with and gave advice and tricks. And just, it was very informational. I mean, so kids got to miss class, but it was very informational and a great way because there have been some issues at the high school with social media, and I was happy to participate in that.
I heard it was very informative.
It
and very
was,
well done.
yes, it was really.
Yeah, that's really excellent. All right, thank you. Thank you, Yulia and Gabby. All right, agenda item 11.0 is new business and 11.1 is our remote snow day plan. So first, do I have a motion to approve the remote snow day plan as approved?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm a little concerned about, it's a big decision. Last year, we, as Gabby mentioned, we did sort of poll the community to get information from them. And I worry about having sort of setting the precedent for that without really including our stakeholders. And I don't want to be reactive in our decision making. It's something so time sensitive, and it's something that's important to our community and integral for obviously the learning process. So I'd like to move to table this discussion to allow us to sort of gather some feedback, which may mean that it moots the issue for this year. But from my perspective, I don't see it as an emergency. We've been in this situation years before, and I don't think that we should proceed without making a sound decision that includes all of our stakeholders. So I'll make the motion to table it.
Second.
So the current motion is to table the vote for the remote snow day. So do we have any discussion on that? So I know you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would also support tabling it. I agree with Alicia. It's a big decision and it feels like a really big one to make, having no input from the community.
I have a question. If we table for 2 weeks until the next meeting, does it seem like enough time to get a survey together, get it out, get the results back and report back?
Probably could do that, yeah.
Okay. All right, so I need to be sure I do this. First off, is there any more discussion on the tabling? Okay, so I want to be sure I do this in the right order, Leanne. So if I mess this up, please tell me. So we have to vote on the original first, or the tabled for the new motion, the tabled motion first.
Table first.
Okay, so the current motion is well, let me take a quick pause. Alicia, does tabling it until, do you want to set the date till the next meeting? Do you want to flesh that out a little bit more? Because if we're, before we vote, I would like to say if we are going to table it, I would like to know when we're going to, like, not just that we're tabling it into, forever, but we have a set date,
Yeah, if we can get the data by then, that's fine.
the next meeting. Okay, so the current motion is to table the vote on the remote snow day for the next meeting. We had a second, we had discussion. All right, so I think we're ready to vote on that one.
Okay. Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos?
No.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Leong?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
Ms. Bertulia?
Yes.
Okay, so we will table until the next board meeting, which will allow time for a survey of the community members and the students. So now we go back and still vote on the initial motion, which was, do we? No. Okay, so we're good. Okay, I apologize. Okay, so we will add this to the next agenda and go do the survey. All right. Agenda item 11.2 is approval of the 2022 board goals and operating protocols. Do I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? I think we're ready to vote.
Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Leong?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
And Ms. Bertulia?
Yes.
Right, thank you very much. Agenda item 11.3 is the approval of the revised building steering committee members. So do I have a motion to approve the new steering committee members as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
No, sir.
I'm sorry, any discussion about, I was looking down at the slide. I didn't see anybody raise their hand.
Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Ms. Leong?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
And Ms. Bertulia?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Agenda item 11.4 is English as a second language program, the LAU plan. Jeff, do you want to? Any information on that?
Yeah, Diane's got a description of it.
Yeah, so Allison Marchese has provided this for us this evening. The LAU plan is a procedural guide that's designed by each school district for the unique needs of its language minority students. It is a document that is reviewed, analyzed, and changed so that it continues to reflect the educational philosophy to allow its limited English proficient students to become responsible citizens in a democratic society and technically diverse world. There are 9 sections in your packet that describe the LAU plan draft or update. That includes legal foundation, identification, development of individualized language programs, meaningful and equitable access to academic and extracurricular activities, equitable personnel, facilities, and materials, annual English language proficiency assessments, exit and monitoring criteria, ongoing program evaluation, and meaningful communication with parents. Of note in this particular revision is an update to federal legislation, changes to the required minimum scores that have been set for English acquisition testing, meaningful access to extracurricular activities and an updating of that definition, identification requirements for English language learners who also have a special education disability. There is a parent's right to refuse services and the school's legal obligation to provide meaningful education and ways that we ensure meaningful communication with parents. And just as an added note for the board, Scarborough Public Schools currently has about 70 English as a second language group of students that represent 28 different languages spoken, with Telugu, Portuguese, Mandarin, and Vietnamese being the most current common languages.
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
Do I have a motion to approve the English as a second language program as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Ms. Casalonis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertulia.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, agenda item 11.5 are the meeting minutes of the January 20th, 2022 workshop. Do I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay,
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Ms. Casalonis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertulia.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Agenda item 11.6 are the meeting minutes from the January 20th, 2022 business meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Wait, any discussion?
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Ms. Casalonis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertulia.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. 11.7, agenda item 11.7 are appointments. 11.71 is the middle school health and PE teacher.
Okay, so this is a halftime position. There we go. This is a halftime position created by resignation. Cyprian Marinette has been chosen to fill this position. He received both his bachelor's degree in physical education and his master's degree in training and sports performance from, I'm going to butcher this, Bapaz Bolyai University in Romania. He has taught physical education in Romania and in schools in Portland. And then also the second appointment this evening is our K-12 SEL specialist. Stacy Knapp has been selected to fill this new position. Ms. Knapp earned both a Bachelor's of Science degree in education and a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from the University of Maine at Orono. She received her Master's of Education from Lehigh University. She has many years of teaching middle school and high school English to students, both in the local districts and then also has worked abroad, including in Germany, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, and the UK. And most recently, she's been serving as an instructional coach at Kennebunk Middle School.
All right, so do I have a motion to approve the middle school health and PE teacher position as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay.
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Ms. Casalonis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertulia.
Yes.
Do I have a motion to approve the K through 12 SEL specialist as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Ms. Katsalonis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertulia.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Agenda item 12.0 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Okay. Mrs. Giftis.
Yes.
Ms. Katsalonis,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Ms. Leong,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peony Huff,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertulia.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much and have a great night, everybody. Bye, Leanne.